This conference will now be recorded.
So good morning, guys. We'll be starting this one. I have to discuss few slides from the unit 2. Fine. So these are the few slides which we left out in the beginning because these are the slides for the unit cover unit 4 actually. So the unit 2 actually basically consists of these are the parts of your unit 4. Fine. So these are the parts of your unit 4 like process management, interprocess communication and the memory management. Fine. These are the annotation tools. Fine. So these are the few permissions we have discussed already. This is all file management. The first topic, the file and the directory management. This consists of your this permissions we have discussed already so far. User permission, group permissions. Fine. So these we have discussed so far. Read, write, executable, numeric and the symbolic representation. This is a part of unit 2. So we directly come to the unit 4 part, that is your these are your this is the unit 4, that is your process management. Fine. So what do you mean by process management? So process management is nothing but a program and execution. Anything which is running, it becomes your anything which is not running, that is your program. And when you start running, become the process. So process is associated with the program instructions, the data, the program counter, and all your CPU registers, process tags containing the temporary data. Each individual process runs in its own virtual address space and is capable of interacting with another process except through secure kernel managed mechanism. Fine. So every process, every PID or every child process or a parent process has own virtual address space. Each process has some information. I already told you that process ID, the owner, the priorities, the permission rights, the pointers. So this all being their information. This is all about the metadata about your processes. So this is the virtual all information that present for the process to start and to end the process. Fine. So next one, each process is represented by a task structure. Already told you in last class that a data structure name is task structure, data structure. It containing few information like the process state, whether process is running, whether process is waiting, or in the queue for the scheduling, whether terminated, various process states are there. So Sorry guys, I think my internet has gone. So yes guys, screen is audible, everyone?
Yes, ma'am. It
Okay,
is.
fine. Sorry. Okay. I think I've lost my internet connection. I have now replaced it to someone. Okay, fine. We start with just unit 2, and then unit 2 has few slides that consist of unit 4. So we have to discuss about the process management. Process management consists of your process. I've discussed. It consists of your it will consist of your this basic information about the process. Fine, scheduling information, all the identifiers, the process IDs or any user IDs, those who have permission to run that process, then timer, the time limit, the kernel keep track of the processes, creation time, as well as CPU time that consumes during its lifetime. Then it consists of all interprocess communication like file systems, current directories, and list of open files. Then it consists of your virtual memory, how many space it required for a process to run, any other process specific context like registers, their stacks, their heap memories. This all information, this is all about the information to run a process starting from the initialization to the ending. And the data structure that consists of is your task structure. Fine. So this is your then Linux address space. It has virtually has the areas allocated to it. And the various allocated areas are like, for example, the code one, fine, the code where the piece of code will be there. Then initialization data is there. Actually, your memory is divided into various segments, like where the code will reside, where the initialization data to start the process, it will reside. Zero initialization data means that the system defined data. Initialization data is the basic shell environment, what is required by your code to run. And this is the zero initialization, that is your hardware or your basic, you can say, loading environment, that is called zero initialization data. Then your heap and then your stacks. Stacks will consist of all your basic local variables in your programs, and heap will consist of all your memory, current locations like your pointers and other thing that will consist in your heap. Fine. So this is your then the code. What do you mean by the code? Code offers refers to as your text segment. So it refers to as your text segments, this area in which executable instructions resides. Only one copy of the instruction of the same program resides in a memory at the time it is transparent to the running programs. The portion of the executable file containing the text segment, and that is called a text section. The piece of code which you write is actually called as a text section and usually swapped off the disk when the memory gets too tight. So this is the first portion where the memory is actually low. This is the first portion or the one segment of the process that is moved out of the disk because of the low memory. So this is as a least purity and least space is occupied by the code. So it's moved out first from the if the virtual memory is actually low. Fine. Next is your initialization data, statically allocated global data that can be initialized with non-zeros values live in the data segment. Now, the second segment is called as your data segment. That is all about your metadata that consists of your initialization data, how to initialize, how to start your process. What are the user IDs? What is this? And the portion of the executable file containing the data segment is the data section. So there is one, this is called a data segment, and is a data section to execute that file. Then zero initialization data that will consist of, I tell you about all the hardware related global and statically allocated data that is initialized to zero by default are kept in what is called as your BBS area, that is your buffering static area. while running the BBS data are placed in the data segment. The format of Linux and Unix executable files such that non-variables are initialized to non-zero value occupying the disk, and a large array declared as static char buffering, which is automatically zero filled, does not take up to 2 KB worth of disk space. So it's all buffering of your data, buffering states so that it defaults set to 0, and when the initialization take place, its values are then automatically set. Otherwise, it's the 0 initialization to everything from your PID, from your virtual memory. It everything initialize your variables or your initialization set to 0. That is why it's called a 0 initialization data. It sets everything to 0, and after when initialization of data take place, it will start containing the data, how much memory it is required, how much user it is required, that will coming up. So initialization, it will take place to 0, and after that it will start taking up the values. Then next segment is your heap. Heap is actually called as your dynamic memory. It is obtained by malloc or your deallocation with dmalloc. Fine. As the memory is allocated or the process address spaces grow, the heap memory is actually towards upward. It grows upward. That means it keeps on, it's dynamic, it's not static. As your data requirement keeps on increasing, this memory keeps on increasing. There is a possible give back memory to the system and shrink of process. So it can give back if the virtual memory is low in the system. This is the memory that releases first and give back. Another, your stack is fixed. So this means successive items are added to the heap, are added to the addresses that are numerically greater than the previous items. So it keeps on increasing as soon as your processes start executing. It will keeps on increasing as per your data requirement, as you process data requirement. So it's a dynamic memory. Fine. So next segment is your stack. Stack is where the local variables are allocated. The use of the stack for the function parameters and returns the value that make it convenient for the recursive functions. All your functions, all your local variables are residuals. Variable stores on the stack disappear when the function containing them returns. The space on the stack is reused for subsequent function calls. So it's just a static memory. It can be abolished, it can be reflushed, or it can be redo or reuse again and again. On most of the modern architecture, the stack grows downward, meaning that items deeper in the call chain are numerically have the lower addresses. As you move downwards, it will have the lower addresses. So most priorities of the top addresses, and then as you go up, as you go down, it has a more of lower addresses. So it keeps tracks of your recursive functions and local variables in your data segment or in your code section. These are the process states already being discussed. Whether the process first is go for creation. Once it's created, it has to go in the ready state. Once it is ready, it is pipeline, or it can be queued. It can be in the queue or scheduling. Then it keeps on executing. In the executing, if it requires or some way or input output, process can we go for the function or waiting or once the required waiting, or once it file or resource, the process is waiting, it is again ready for execution. Fine. If it doesn't got any interrupt signal or anything wrong goes in your program, then it will stop. And otherwise, if it execute properly, it will go for your termination or for ending of your process. That's it. So these are various states the process has to undergo, depends upon its scheduling policy, depends upon its input output requirements, depends upon its proper execution. Otherwise, it will lead to a proper ending of the process. Now, process creation will take place in 3 phases, or you can say 3 system calls. I discussed you about this one also in the last slides. That system calls three phases, how the process is created. The first one is your fork. So we create a process. This fork is actually a system call. We create a process by creating a copy of its existing process, copy of the existing process. The new process has a different PID, and the process that created becomes its parent. So one becomes your parent, and it becomes a copy of your parent process, and that is called as your forking. Forking means actually copying of your parent process. It will take a copy by using this command or by taking this system call, and but it has a different PID. Fine, it has different virtual space, it has different resources, everything is different. It has a different data section, different code section, everything is different. Then after creation, this fork is for creation. This fork is for creation. This fork system call will create the process. Then second is your execution. Now run the process. After forking the process, the address space of the child process is overwritten with the new process data. This is done through an execution call to the system. So one and the process is execute now. Fine. So execution is done by exe, and this is called as your execution system call. So third one is your wait. Now I tell you that what do you mean by wait? When your process is actually waiting for your any resource or any file to be read. For example, if you try to access a file and file is already opened by some other user for writing, so you cannot read that file, or print. So print already in the spooling or a buffering is already has few commands to run before your command, so it keeps on waiting. So that is your waiting. Wait means it will blocks the calling process until the child process terminates. If the child process has already terminated, the wait call returns immediately. It picks up the exit status of the child process. Now it has a waiting period. It has to wait for some time. Within that period, if the process doesn't get the resource or doesn't get the any file or any command is not executed, so its waiting time it start lapsing. So once the waiting times lapse, it will blocks the calling process until the child process. First is terminate the child process. If the child process already terminated, for example, is already first is go for it will check for any that the process is any child process. If the process has any child process, then and the process is already been terminated, then the wait call returns immediately. It picks up the exit status of the child process and it moves out of your main process. So wait is has some time he has to wait for the any kind of processes. So wait has a time period. If it lapses, it will go for termination or any kind of interruption or stopping or exiting of the process. Then the process has to reschedule for again in the queue for in a ready state. So it will come up again. For example, the process has been terminated. The child process or the parent process will come again with their new PID numbers to be executed. So one is your fork, so one is your execute, and one is your wait. This is a simple program of forking. For example, if you write in a C, so this is a program written in C, how to execute your fork process. You have declare one variable PID. Fine. In a PID, that is your process ID. This is your variable. Now you will call a system call that is fork. Now fork will give you a PID number. So once the PID number is greater than 0, for example, after forking, after conduct, this function will return a number integer that is your PID. Now if the PID is if the PID is greater than 0, fine, that means the process has been allocated a PID, so it will print the parent PID, it will print the child PID by get PID and printing. So one is your this is child. So child has a PID. Parent PID, the function name is get PID. So it will get the parent PID of that child. So get PID and PID. This is for printing your integers. So this is your parent PID, child PID, and the function to get the parent PID is get PID and normal PID of the child. If the fork doesn't execute, so PID has a by default value is 0. Fine. Now if PID is 0, then any child, it will print the 0. If it has a parent PID, it will get the parent PID. So if the PID is greater than 0, it will print that value. Else if PID is 0, otherwise also it can print the PID values. Fine. Or if else the fork has an error, if something else it will generate it. So by default 0. If it's not 0, then something else is there, then there is an error. Fine. So it will have this parent PID, child PID if greater than 0. If it's equal to 0, then the child has this value and parent PID has this value. So in both the cases it will work if it's greater than 0 or equal to 0, else it is an error. I have discussed these few management functions like kill. To kill any process, the command is kill and mention the process ID. Fine. Similarly, to kill all, you want to stop all the programs. So you want write kill all. So it will stop all the processes which are started by any of the user. So process PS stands for your process status. It will show the PID, the terminal type, when the process started, and where the command is executed right now. So it has been bash already been running and the PS. So there are two things which are running. One is your shell and one is your process. These are the various options of the process I have already discussed. PS with aim, select all the processes, it will give you the. Similarly, PS small a will select on the terminal but does not display about the system processes. So it will give you about the system processes, it will not give you. Similarly, full list. So F stands for detailing about the PID of every process. So every full information, then you go for PS-M. Then group G, group names, then about the terminal, then about the every processes that is running and any user specific information about the processes, then go for U. Fine. Top man and top command is also being discussed. That what are the top command provides you a dynamic real time. Tell about the real time analysis of the CPU. That how many resources are allocated, how many CPU is taking, what is the health of the CPU, what is the health of your memory. So all about health information about your system will give by your top command. So it shows about your task, memory, CPU, and press Q to quit from the window. Similarly, CPU usage, memory usage, runtime, that it will display the updated information every 5 seconds. Every 5 seconds, this command will keeps on updating by default. You can change the option by D command. So there is a D, how much delay you want. You want to delay for 20 seconds or 2 minutes, the information to be updated to you, then you go for D command. Similarly, P for the process ID of the each task. PPID is a parent process ID of the each task. User ID, username. PRI stands for priority, memory usage, percentage of CPU time, total number of processes. So this all is being discussed by your top command. Now next one is your interactive types of processes. There are few types of processes. One is your interactive. Interactive, they are associated with the terminals. And automatic processes, that means batch processes that are not connected to the terminal. Rather, these tasks can be queued into a spooler area where they have to wait to be executed on a FIFO basis. So these are the automatically background processes. These are interactive processes that user has to go for it. And daemons are the server processes that run continuously, starting from your initialization to your ending. So these daemons are the server processes that run continuously. Most of the time they are initialized at a system startup and then wait in the background until their services are required. After the system is booted, the network daemon just sits and wait until a client program, this FTP client, needs to be connected. So daemons are your background processes that are running. If they are required, they will be off, otherwise they will sit silently in the background and wait for their call. So these are called as daemon. So one is your interactive, one is your automatic, and one are the daemons. Then how in between the process communication, inter-process communication with each other, fine, with each other and with the kernel. The processes communicate with each other also, and like who requires the buffer, who requires the printer, resource sharing, everything. So processes communicate with each other and with the kernel to coordinate their activities with Linux. Facilities provides method for the multiple processes to communicate with one another. Linux support number of different IPC mechanism. I've told you earlier, pipes, input of one command, output of one command goes to the input of another command. So piping, first in, first out, then signals are there, interrupt. These signals are to give the messages, short messages to the processors. So these are called as your signals, or these are also called, and in hardware technology is called as an interrupt. In normal layman is called a signal. For example, printer is not there attached. So signal has to be there while system that the printer is not attached, but you have issued a command for the printer. That is a signal. For example, one file is not there, but you are searching for a file in a program. So signal is there that no file is found, or there is error in that file opening. That is a signal. So in between the messages, between the system, between the resources has to be there, and these are called as your signals to the user, to the shell, to the environment, or to the system. Then system with IPC stands for your interprocess. It can be a messages queue, it can be a semaphore, it can be a shared memories. So these are all other technologies which can be used for interprocess communications. Semaphore is also for the resource allocation. Message queue is like short messages, and they're lined up in the queue for giving up a messages and a shared memory. So shared memory, obviously, it is simply by reading, writing a specific sharing fine for reading and writing and everything. Map memory is similar to a shared memory, except that it's associated with a file. So when you're talking about the map memory, it will talk about the system, talk about the file within the file system. So map memory is about the file. You're sharing one file by all the resources, or all the file is shared by all the processes which are running. That is called as your map memory. And when you're talking about any kind of specific area of the hardware, that is called as your shared memory. Pipes, obviously nothing but a communication from one process to another process. FIFO are similar to the pipes. Fine, they are communicating the file, and depends upon your FIFO is nothing but the scheduling mechanism, that who will come first and who will come last, and who will come out first and who will come late. So that is your, this is similar to pipes, except the unrelated processes communicate because pipe is given a name in the file. So pipe is nothing but a command, name is allocated. So you are joining the pipes. FIFO is better to say like who comes first. That is why it's called unrelated processes. These processes are not related. Who comes the first will be served first. Socket supports communication for unrelated processes on a different computers. So socket is nothing for the networking. To communicate with your remote or with your server or your clients, then you have to use a socket. Pipe already been discussed. Fine. This is a pipe. So input of output of one goes to another. For example, P2 writes something, it will go in a pipe, and that output goes to the input of someone else. So someone reads that one. So pipe already been discussed, like the, for example, this one, information ls. So ls is the listing of all the files. That's the output, and now it goes to a list. That means it will show you the list information about the listing. Similarly, cat is nothing. Cat is for displaying the content. So cat, your file, it will display the content of the file one. It will goes as a piping, and it will count the number of lines in that file. And the command is WC, count the number of lines, and will display the output, the number of lines only. Fine. So this is a piping. This is an example of pipe also. Parent, fine. Parent will go for the forking. It becomes your child process. Child will write something. Fine. Through piping, it will be read by the parent process. That is called a pipe system call. This is a system defined. This is your system. PID, this is the process one. Forking is done. Then child, and this is your pipe system call. Initially, your pipe has actually, you declare one pipe as an integer variable, or you can say, and it has a one array. You're passing this int pipe is a function, and it's taking a function as a parameter, as an array of file description, 2 spaces, and here it's passing. So pipe is a function. It will taking a one array as an argument parameter. Fine. So this is a creating a pipe. This is actually a creating a pipe in the terms of your coding, how to create a file, how to create a pipe by using a forking. Like for example, create a pipe. You have created a one pipe function, and this is your pipe function array, and it consists of all your piping. So case one, switching of the fork, and this is FD0. FD0 is for reading the purpose. FD1, that is your array. Fine. So array of your type pipe, and declaring returning a value integers. So one is a system call. These are all system call. Pipe is a system call to a pipe, reading for the pipe, and write is to write to a pipe. Similarly, name piped here is called FIFO. It's between the unrelated processes. Those who come first will take the position, and those who come the second will take position. First in, first out. These are unrelated information, and similarly, pipe is created between the unrelated information. Fine. This is a process 2. This is a process 1, and this is your. So first in, first out pipe is a name in the system. Any process can open or close the FIFO. The processes on the either end of the file need not be related to each other. They are not related to each other. Those who come the first will serve the first. So FIFOs are called as your name piped. Fine. So a system calls a FIFO. You don't have to go in detail, but only you know about the FIFO. First in, first out. Then creating a file. How can you create a FIFO? By using a mkFIFO. So mkFIFO is a function that is a system call. This is also one kind of a system call to create your FIFO. Fine. So this is your one. 2 common uses of FIFO is obvious. First is your client server application, and used by your to pass from the data from server process to client processes, and used by your shell commands to pass data from one shell pipeline to another without creating your temporary files. So shell commands also use the FIFO to pass the data from one to another without creating your temporary files or without creating your temporary. The signals I told you, these are called as software generated interrupts. For example, your printer is not attached, then you require an interrupt that your printer is not attached, or driver is not installed, or file or something. So these are signals, are the software generated interrupts that are sent to the process when the event happened. Example of the event: programs attempted to access a non-existing location. Fine. Requesting user to kill a process or an error condition. You are signaling to a user that something error in your process, or something you are wanting, your process wants something resource and is not available. Signals are also used by the shell to signal job control commands to their child processes. Sometimes the parent also want to signal the child. So that signal can be also used job control commands to signal their child processes. Signals can also come directly from sometimes signals also directly come from the OS kernel when the hardware event occurs, such as bus error or any kind of illegal instructions are there, or any hardware problem. Then also signals are generated. Signals are basically software generated interrupts. Fine. In the terms of hardware, it is called as interrupts. Interrupts means any halt situation is there in the process, then it's called as interrupts. They are set of defined signals. Obviously, you want to kill that one, then kill command is there. Fine. Each signal is defined by the 5 classes: a hardware condition, a software condition, any error in hardware, any software, any IO, printer is not available, any process is not created properly, or any resource control. Any resource doesn't have the control, or any input-output function. These are two parameters on which the various signals are categorized. It can be a hardware, software, it can be input output, it can be a process related. Fine. Signals has no inherent priorities. Signals has no inherent priorities. If two signals are generated for the same process at the same time, they may be presented to the process or handled in that order. So there is no priority. Signal can be generated interruptly to give the information about any error on this. Fine. To kill any command, kill is a function to kill that signal, to kill that process or that has been occurred in your process ID. Signals are same. You read out this one. So Linux implements signals using the information stored in the task structure for the process. Currently, pending signals are kept in a signal field. One is called a signal field. All the signals are keep on queuing. Fine. It also handles the information about how each process handles the signals. It held in the area of SIG action data structure pointed by data that task structure for each process. So SIG action is actually a pointer where all your signals are lined up, and it will be this is the main data structure, task structure, which contains all the information of the process, and it has one pointer that is called as SIG action data that contains all the data about the signals generated during that process execution. Fine. So this pointer will handle all your signals. A process can choose how to handle the various signals. Process can block the signals. They can even choose to handle themselves. If the kernel handles the signals, then it performs the default actions. So signals are actually handled at various levels. Kernel can also handle, user can also handle. So depends upon that what is type of signal it is. So it is handled by each level. So a different category depend upon that. Fine. So how to signals can be? Similarly, signals can be your kill and it can be raise. For killing, you required a PID for which process it has been generated, and every signal has a number. So sig is for example, int sig. Fine. So this is your PID for that process. The signal has been generated. Kill that signal. Similarly, raise. You can raise any kind of signal. It returns a 0 on the success and -1 on the error. It sends the signals to the executing program to set. For example, there are system defined signals also. So you can also send the signals. For example, printer is not there, resource is not available, so it has a one number. So that number you can generate and raise that this resource is not available by the program actually using the kill. So you can kill also and you can raise the signals also. Fine. Similarly with the message queues also. So these are the two system defined functions, message ND and message CV. That means your message ND is for your queues you are making up and sending your message. Message send. So one is your message SND, sending the message, and one is your receiving the message. So these are the by system defaults associated with the message queue. You want to send any message with an integer number, return value, message flag, whether the message has been seen or not. So this is the message flag, and message received. So one is your sending and one is your receiving. Then we will discuss memory management in the next class because it is not the part of your. So we will discuss memory management in the next class. Today we only have discussed the process management. The main is your system call and your memory management. So we will discuss the memory management in tomorrow class. I will take tomorrow class for the memory management.